What do I bring? I bring my culture and respect of people and acknowledge the diversity of the people that I'm working with. When I talk about my people, the greatest counsellors in the world, and greatest conservationists, greatest scientists, greatest astronomers, all that sort of stuff. And we share. That's what I like to share with the people. And I'm quite sure that the group I'm working with will be able to share their stories in a similar fashion. That's how we learn. When our kids start talking, parents tend to listen because our kids will always be out there playing together, There might be a dozen kids and all these kids come from different backgrounds. Here they're all playing together. So I think it's time the parents needed educating, and then we could follow up with talking to our kids about a lot of stuff. Then have a learning circle at home, and people come in the backyard. They're black and white people, because these white people got Aboriginal blood in them. It's a good place to be in the circle. We learn so much. I grew up with like the Greeks, Italians and the white girls. The Maltese, we classify them as our brothers and sisters, and we looked after each other. Things have all changed, A few years back, you would have heard the word racism. You might only hear it about twice a year. But now, they say, oh, these people over there, they're racist. They may not be racist, just they have bad comments. So they're good people gone wrong. But they weren't born with that, it's just that the company they associate with, they're not racist people. It's just stupidity, the way they're carrying on. There's a lot of good people out there. They just need educating. And I noticed today, a lot of the young people, because I've worked in the Blacktown Children's Court, where I work with a lot of kids. I always give them a hug and kiss, the young boys, 14-year-old. And I used to say to them, I love you, and I give them a hug and a kiss them on the forehead. And I did exactly the same thing with the girls. I told them how much I loved them, because they never ever got that when they were kids. Their parents never ever nurtured them. And if they did, they wouldn't be in that courtroom fronting the magistrate. So the so-called elders that were working in the courtroom, but I didn't see them as elders, but they said they were elders. And the way they spoke to the kids in a rough manner, oh, you need a good kick in the backside, you want to wake up, so I'm talking to kids like that. I was going to tell these so-called elders, before you go any further, how about you tell these kids your story and how wonderful you were and you were Mummy's little angel. So, we were all kids once, I tell them, Don't talk like that to kids, not humiliate them. When I look at it, they're all my kids. You've got to live it, to understand about Aboriginal culture. It's not something you've got to read out of a book or heard someone talk about it. You've got to be there in that community and lived it. I keep telling people that. I said, don't come near me saying you're an elder, because you're not. Aunty so-and-so, she's not an elder. Or Uncle so-and-so, they're not elders. Because they were never taught anything. Because they got to a certain age, they think they're elders, but they're not. I suppose we call them elderly, but not elders. It's got nothing to do with culture. And how to work in communities and how to work with kids. Because our kids, one day they're going to be our future leaders. And that's why we need to spend a lot of time with the little ones before they get into a lot of trouble. You wonder why they got there. and a lot of them got there through getting in with the wrong company and people telling them different stories. How they can do this and how they can do that. It's not real, what they're telling them. And that's why they need to go back to the old people to learn the old ways.
Uncle Greg's, he's a Darug man, so he's got the area down here. Mum was Darug too, but I'm Gundungurra and that's Dad's area. So I'm a Gundungurra person and I look after them up the mountains. And I used to just trail along behind and Uncle Greg will say, well, you're an elder now, get up here. I said, okay, that's easy, I can do that. And he just put me on the right track and made it easier for me to relax and to realise that I am an elder, and if people want to come to me with questions, they can. You let them have their say, and then you sit back and you try and figure that out yourself while others are still talking. And then automatically it just sort of comes to you as to what you've got to say, and that's what I do. And they always say, oh, that was good. So it works really well if we can just take the time with each other. We've got to be very careful on how we approach people because sometimes there's a lot of jealousy. Whether somebody's going to stab you in the back, probably shouldn't have said that, but that's what it is. I'm not into jealousy. If they're going to attack me, well, I'll just stand back and let them attack me. But when they're finished, that's when I'll have my say. And 9 times out of 10 we end up being friends. Or getting to know each other anyway. When I was growing up, it was dreadful. But a lot of their kids or their grandkids now are coming up and talking to me. And they say, I know all about you, can you teach me this and can you teach me that? And teach me how to throw a boomerang. I said, that's the boys' job, so we're in touch with one of the boys. And the boys came and they took the boys away and the girls come to me and we done some weaving and stuff like that, so it worked out really well. So, and basketball, I coached kids at basketball from the schools. We made the semi-finals. We nearly won it. Gee whiz, I don't know, about over 20 years. There was these 3 women that just wanted to say that, well, you're Aboriginal, you don't know anything. And they're ones I had through primary school, by the way, too. Those women, they just didn't like me. And a lot of these come from the women, come from the women that just wanted to get rid of me. White women, yeah. So they just laid into me and I just got up and walked away. Bit of blood coming out, but hey, that's my badge of honour. So I thought, well, if I can put up with this, then the kids have got a chance of putting up with their parents as well.
This project, this journey that we're going on, really was part of us exploring our own selves, where we came from, why we want to contribute, how we're going to contribute, and how everything we do in our work, what that looks like and how that sits in a context of anti-racist practice and culturally safe and responsive practice. But it's also about, well, how have I been racist towards myself even at my own how have I been the master of my own oppression? I often talk about systemic or structural racism. My job is to, influence and shape policy so that it improves outcomes for people in the land. I'm not talking about just politicians. It could be, the entertainment networks, the shows we grow up on and that shape, our worlds. And that privilege that I have, I bring my own experiences to that. What's important for me is that I have people like Uncle Greg and Aunty Carol by my side.
If you say 10 years time, I don't want to be working in this space anymore because there's no more issues. That's a very utopian view of the world, but it's a dream. I'd rather dream big. Yeah, well, in 10 years' time, I want to work myself out of this industry, in this community sector. Everything I do is trying to uplift community. So my dream is to be able to have that experience that I had when I was younger in terms of racism, discrimination. I want to see community live without that. It's a big dream, but one can dream.
Stories to Solutions, it was actually the first project that I was allocated when I got here. Focusing on Indigenous-run, Indigenous-controlled organisations. I don't like to call them interviews because it seems very one-sided. It was a conversation. One particular conversation, I had my own manner of asking the questions, which I didn't think was all that bad. And I received the feedback that it was received in a much more almost aggressive way. Not aggressive out of like violence or malice or anything, but the way that I was asking the question made them think that I was trying to justify the work that they were doing and how they were doing the work and where they were getting the money from. And it was an insight in terms of being able to hear back my question, but the way that they received it. And it was something that hadn't been told to me before. And so I immediately used that feedback to improve my next conversation with the next person that I was going to be talking to. There is that mindset of always striving to be a better version of yourself and having the organisation strive to be a better version of itself. I've been learning and I've been trying to improve myself on not just being non-racist, but being actively anti-racist, both personally and professionally. And I think it's through listening to stories from the working group or listening to other stories that go on in the office or doing training here or speaking to external stakeholders or just doing the regular day-to-day work that I do.
So Codebreakers is this really exciting project that looks at race, identity and belonging. How do we engage young people in such conversations and how do we upskill them and support them so that they can be champions of community and social harmony? The one element of Codebreakers is this Codebreaker Gallery, which showcases the work of young people. So young people have submitted into the project poems or diary entries or just their general thoughts, again, around those three themes of race, identity and belonging. And so the gallery, which sits on our website, showcases those works that they have submitted. And it's beautiful to see young people be so vulnerable and talk about their real life experiences.
The project that's taken up most of my time and energy, it's called Safe Here, is a project that is about creating identifiable safe spaces in Western Sydney, in commercial business areas. The work that was involved was actually about training businesses about how to support members of the community or their customers who may be experiencing racism. I'll reframe that again. Found myself during that period of lockdown writing opinion pieces and feeling so passionate about wanting to just highlight the critical issues that we were seeing, and the fact that Western Sydney was in the centre of the media, the fact that we were spoken about but not spoken to. And for me, that made me realise that being at Western Sydney Community Forum to play an advocacy role was connected to my sense of purpose. A very large proportion of businesses in Western Sydney are actually made up of people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, some of which have had their own experiences of racism. And so there was a process of providing them information about support services, running training on the role a business can play by providing active hospitality, by being able to offer a very basic form of accidental counselling, and to help them to understand as well the mental health impacts of racism and that the role that a bystander can play if you're a business owner or your staff member sees something can really play a huge role in how that person processes that trauma.
So as part of the work and during that break time in meetings for COVID, one of the opportunities that arose in terms of anti-racism was the release of a consultation paper by the Australian Human Rights Commission, which was about a proposed national anti-racism framework. So this would be about bringing anti-racism into the national conversation and saying as a nation we support anti-racism and we want to dismantle racism, so to speak. So what we did was we put in a policy submission into that consultation and we made a number of recommendations, which was about centering First Nations in any anti-racism framework. It was about looking at the media and media portrayals and a whole host of other recommendations. Essentially, we said we were in support of a national anti-racism framework. Since our submission, we have had many conversations with the Australian Human Rights Commission as they recognise Western Sydney to be one of the most diverse communities in Australia. I think just centering First Nations is part of any approach to anti-racism. It's more the theory, the evidence, everything suggests that you centre First Nations. So in terms of developing a shared understanding and shared terminology around race and anti-racism, one of the first things a working party did was organise training through a consultancy called Hue Colour the Conversation, and it's led by people of colour, women of colour and trans people of colour, to deliver anti-racism and kind of awareness training, rather than having people without colour delivering training around these issues. We were able to look at and develop a shared understanding of terms such as race or culture or ethnicity and all of that, to see what that means to us collectively rather than, from our own varied understandings. And where I would like to go at an individual professional level is probably just to continue this reflection, continue to be guided by Uncle Greg and Aunty Carol in their teachings and just some of the things that they say. An example that Aunty Carol used once at a meeting of I was at that training on allyship, and she just said, when kids are getting teased at school because they're migrants or something like that, I just tell our kids, just stand next to them. You don't have to come in, you don't have to say anything, you don't have to take over, you don't have to whatever, just be side by side with people. It was just simple but meant so much.
I love my life and I love nursing, and anything you can do to help anybody else is a great thing. That's what it's all about.